I'm still going to have a Mötley Crüe record playing up the tube. Tommy would dig me up and use my bones for drumsticks.
At the age of 73, Mick Mars shocked the public by telling everyone some serious things about Mötley Crüe. He said the band was cutting him out of his share of money and trying to take away his control over the band. These statements were only the beginning of a much more complicated story. What is really going on? Let's take a closer look at what happened between Mick Mars and Mötley Crüe. Mick Mars was born in 1951 in Terre Haute, Indiana. His real name is Robert Allen Deal. He grew up in a family that didn't have much money and started playing music when he was a teenager. Before becoming famous with Mötley Crüe, Mars spent almost 20 years playing in small bands in California that nobody knew about. He kept failing and changing groups over and over again. Those years of being rejected made him tough and gave him the style that later made him famous when he helped start Mötley Crüe in 1981. From the very beginning, Mick Mars was very important in making Mötley Crüe's music sound the way it did. While the other band members were known for acting wild and living crazy lives, Mars stayed focused on making good music and playing guitar really well. He was actually the one who came up with the name Mötley Crüe after hearing someone call them a motley-looking crew. That idea not only helped brand the band, but also showed what kind of person he was. The biggest difference between Mick Mars and the rest of Mötley Crüe was how hard he worked. While the other guys followed what was popular in metal music at the time, Mars stayed true to traditional blues rock. He created heavy, deep guitar sounds that made hits like Kickstart My Heart, Girls, 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 and Dr. Feelgood so special. People who worked with him in the recording studio said that Mars was often the first person to arrive and the last person to leave. He always carried a notebook where he wrote down technical notes about each guitar solo. Mick Mars's hard work becomes even more amazing when you know about the bone disease he has. When he was 17 years old, Mars found out he had something called ankylosing spondylitis. This is a disease that causes constant pain and makes the bones in his spine slowly stick together. It's a very rare disease that makes it hard to move around and causes pain all the time. Medical records that Mars shared during a court case in 2023 showed that he had surgery on his spine in 2004. Doctors put metal rods in his back to help him stand up straight, and he deals with pain every single day just to be able to perform. Even though he had these health problems, Mars never let his illness control his career. For more than 40 years, he was part of every studio album, tour, and major event with the band. People who work in the music business have said many times that most of the guitar parts you hear on Mötley Crüe's albums were played completely by Mars himself. He didn't use substitutes or tricks to make it sound better. Sound engineers at Elektra Records, the company that made many of the band's albums, noticed that Mars was the only band member who always carried his guitar with him everywhere, even during interviews and when they were backstage. Unlike his bandmates, Mars was rarely involved in scandals about drugs, violence, or legal trouble during Mötley Crüe's most successful years. He was quiet and somewhat kept to himself, which meant he didn't get much attention from reporters and magazines, but he was like a steady anchor for the band's music. Hard rock and metal websites have done surveys that show Mars is the most respected member of the group, especially because he was consistent and refused to just follow commercial trends. His achievements alone are enough to make him a legend in rock history. Mötley Crüe has sold over 100 million records, done dozens of world tours, and been recognized by important institutions like the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Even though the band hasn't been officially inducted yet, behind all the fame lies a long period of quietly dealing with physical pain and being alone. This is a truth that the public has only recently started to understand. On October 26, 2022, Mick Mars officially announced that he was stopping touring with Mötley Crüe because of health reasons. He said his health problems no longer allowed him to keep up with the band's demanding schedule of performing on stage. His statement was very clear about one thing. He said he was still an official member of the band and was only stepping back from live performances. He wasn't giving up his membership or his share in the group. This news was quickly picked up by major magazines like Variety, Billboard, and Rolling Stone, and it got a lot of attention from fans. Shortly after, Mötley Crüe released their own press statement saying that a new guitarist would replace Mick Mars for the rest of their stadium tour with Def Leppard. They announced that John Five, who was known for working with Marilyn Manson and Rob Zombie, would be the new guitar. The contents of the press release made people ask questions. There were no details saying that Mars was still a band member, and there was no mention of how they would share royalties or profits after he stepped down from touring. The way the band described Mars as someone who had completed his mission made people doubt whether they were being honest about the situation. What made the situation worse was how the band handled the media in the weeks that followed. Promotional materials for the tour completely removed Mick Mars' image. News of John Five's replacement caused controversy among fans. Before joining Mötley Crüe, John Five had been close to several band members, especially Nikki Sixx. Some music magazines suggested that Mars's replacement had been planned ahead of time. Although no public fight happened, people said that Mick Mars was surprised by how quickly everything happened and felt like he was pushed out without anyone asking him what he thought. It's important to know that within Mötley Crüe, Mick Mars always had an independent role. He didn't get involved in personal affairs or business ventures that weren't about music. This helped him keep a clean image, but it also meant his voice didn't carry much weight when the band made decisions. According to people who knew what was happening behind the scenes, Mars was often absent from financial meetings, which led to his voting rights being reduced, even though he still owned a significant share in the Mötley Crüe brand. In the months after he stopped touring, Mick Mars didn't respond publicly. He stayed quiet on social media, refused interview requests, and avoided any events related to Mötley Crüe. But by late January 2023, reporters discovered that he had quietly met with lawyers in Los Angeles and was preparing legal documents about his rights within the group. This was later confirmed by Deadline, showing that Mars didn't accept being removed without his agreement and was preparing a structured response. Another noteworthy thing was how the remaining band members handled the media. Nikki Sixx repeatedly posted unclear statements on Twitter about needing team spirit and the new high-energy lineup, but he never mentioned Mick Mars. Tommy Lee shared rehearsal photos with John Five, while Vince Neil stayed completely silent. Many fans viewed these actions as disrespectful to someone who had been with the group for over 4 decades. As the situation got worse, veteran artists like Dee Snider from Twisted Sister and Tracy Guns from LL Guns spoke out in support of Mick Mars. They called Mötley Crüe's treatment of a founding member a clear betrayal. Major forums in the metal community opened discussions analyzing the legal implications, clearly showing that the fight within the band could no longer be hidden. What started as stepping back from touring had become the beginning of a far more complex series of events. On April 6, 2023, Mick Mars officially filed a lawsuit against Mötley Crüe in the Los Angeles County Superior Court. This marked the start of an unprecedented public legal battle in the band's history. According to details reported by Variety, Mars accused the remaining members of illegally and immorally working together to kick him out and unilaterally cutting his profit share to try to remove him from making decisions. At the heart of the lawsuit was a fight over ownership shares. Mars claimed he still owned a 25% stake in the group, and reducing that stake to 5% was done without any legitimate agreement within the band. His lawyers said that the other members, through their private attorneys and the band's financial officer, had changed the distribution terms on their own, even though Mars never signed any resignation or document transferring his rights. The lawsuit revealed behind-the-scenes details that had never been made public before. In a part quoted by Rolling Stone, Mick Mars said he had been forced to prove his ability to perform through personal tests. He described this as a form of humiliation, especially given his status as an original member. According to Mars, none of the other three members had ever been subjected to similar requirements. The lawsuit also contained shocking allegations about the band's live performances. Mick Mars accused Mötley Crüe of using technical methods like playback and digital aids to maintain their stage image. Specifically, he claimed Vince Neil often lip-synced during recent tours, while Tommy Lee used pre-programmed drum loops. Mars insisted he was the only one performing completely live, and this became the reason he was viewed as out of sync with the band. Immediately after the documents were made public, Mötley Crüe issued an official response denying all allegations. A statement from the band's attorney emphasized that Mick Mars had experienced a significant decline in his ability to perform, was unable to remember songs, and could no longer keep up with the band's pace. Nikki Sixx also posted a series of tweets describing how rehearsals had been disrupted by Mars, saying that the decision to replace him was necessary to maintain performance quality. Fan reactions didn't completely side with the band, though. On music forums and social media, many people argued that Mars was being made a scapegoat in a group increasingly driven by money rather than music. Some industry figures, including veteran journalist Eddie Trunk, suggested that Mars had the most distinctive playing style and that continuing the band without him would make their music weaker. In February 2024, while the legal dispute with Mötley Crüe was still going on, Mick Mars released his first solo album called The Other Side of Mars. This was the first time in his career that he launched a musical project completely independent of the band's name. The album has 10 tracks and blends hard rock with elements of grunge, industrial, and alternative metal. It was clearly different from what people had heard from Mötley Crüe before. Work on The Other Side of Mars began in mid-2022 when Mick Mars decided to spend all his time in a recording studio in Nashville. He worked with Michael Wagner, a producer known for his work with Metallica, Ozzy Osbourne, and Skid Row, to make sure the sound quality and recording techniques were top-notch. The entire process was kept secret until late 2023, when Mars began sharing behind-the-scenes images on social media. The opening track, Loyal to the Lie, immediately caught attention with heavy guitar sounds, pounding rhythms, and an intensely angry tone. Critics viewed the song as a direct response from Mars to the accusations made by his former band. In an interview with Guitar World, he said, "I don't need to write a statement. I just let the guitar do the talking." Most of the other tracks revolve around themes of betrayal, defiance, and standing up for yourself. Musically, The Other Side of Mars received good reviews from critics. Kerrang! Magazine called it the most personal and honest album Mars has ever made. Fan response was very positive too. The album quickly reached number 5 on the iTunes Rock Chart and number 18 on the Billboard Top Rock Albums in its first week. At 73 years old, Mick Mars hasn't chosen to fade away. He's rewriting his final chapter through the sound of his guitar and by telling the truth with his words. Though he's no longer standing on brightly lit stages with Mötley Crüe, he still holds his place as someone who can never be replaced in American classic rock history.